Welcome back to Foreign Assignment this week from Salt Lake City. Before the break, we looked at Iran's connection to Afghanistan, while another nation that is part of President Bush's so-called axis of evil is Iraq, home of Saddam Hussein. The rhetoric involving that country heated up this past week. Iraq said it was open to talking about readmitting UN weapons inspectors. An unimpressed United States says it's considering a full range of options for removing Hussein from power and will go it alone if necessary. All of this comes as the sanctions against Iraq are being reviewed. Sanctions that the Iraqis say have cost 15,000 lives in December alone. Adani Ditmars is a Canadian freelance journalist and one of the few Western reporters recently allowed into Iraq. She went to Baghdad to check on the impact of those sanctions for Foreign Assignment.
This was my 5th trip to Baghdad in 5 years, and I was surprised at how much pessimism had grown since my last visit, when the lifting of sanctions seemed likely. I met Ali, a widowed mother of 8, selling food at Baghdad's Sharjah market. She's typical of millions of Iraqis scraping out a living in a ruined economy. She complains the rations her family receives every month are not enough, and that medicine is either unavailable under sanctions or too expensive. My husband had liver cancer, she says, but we couldn't find the necessary medicines for him and he died. My younger daughter has epilepsy, but I can't afford the medicine she needs. With a government minder just out of sight behind the camera, criticizing the regime itself would be difficult at best. While Ali struggles to make ends meet, there's one businessman with a booming trade in Baghdad. He sells kerosene lamps. There are power cuts 4 or 5 times a day, 3 or 4 times at night, and it's been getting worse. The kerosene salesman says many power stations were bombed by the Americans, and the UN committee overseeing sanctions is putting holds on contracts for spare parts. The United Nations did try to ease the suffering of the Iraqi people 6 years ago, bringing in the Oil for Food program. Iraq is allowed to export oil, and the revenue is used to buy food and medicine, as well as to pay for the administrative costs of the program. But the Sanctions Committee can stop Iraq from purchasing items that could also conceivably be used for military purposes, so-called dual use. That stopped the importation of lead pencils and stethoscopes, among other items. There were $1 billion in frozen contracts last year alone. Until recently, the Iraqi government encouraged foreign reporters to show the alleged results of the seemingly capricious sanctions, allowing journalists into hospitals to photograph sick and starving children. No more. I was surprised to discover I was now denied access. I'm told, unofficially, the Iraqi government has grown sensitive to Western counterclaims that the sanctions are being manipulated to entrench the regime's power. But it's not so easy to close the eyes of the Iraqi people themselves. When the camera is off and the minder is absent, many Iraqis tell me they're now holding both their government and US-backed sanctions accountable for their hardships.
At this auction house in the middle-class neighborhood of Mansour, Iraqis are selling prized possessions ranging from antiques to bird cages and baby cradles.
It's a desperate attempt by Iraqis to liquidate their living room furniture for basics like food and medicine. Anti-sanctions groups like the US-based Voices in the Wilderness, who recently staged a protest at UN headquarters in Baghdad, criticized the Oil for Food program for its short-sightedness.
The problem is that there is no purchasing power. People need jobs. They don't need a handout. The answer to the Great Depression in the United States was not a better bread line. It's not a better Oil for Food program. It's jobs. It's the return of native industries, and that's not going to happen until sanctions are lifted once and for all.
In the meantime, I see the Iraqi economy slowly collapsing, and find many people in this once predominantly secular state turning to Islam for comfort. At Baghdad's Golden Mosque, 28-year-old Isa Yunus comes to pray. His life isn't what he envisioned as a young student before the Gulf War.
I was
the best in my class, he says. But after the war, I had to quit school to support my family. I wanted to be an engineer, but now I'm a tailor. I had faith in God before, but I have become more religious now. I pray 5 times a day for my family and my country. I take refuge in God from all the hardships of life here. In fact, I'm struck by the trend I'm witnessing. More and more Iraqis, especially alienated and underemployed young men, are embracing Islamic fundamentalist beliefs. Many more women are wearing the chador and are less visible in public life. No one dares say this on camera, but the simultaneous rise of both poverty and fundamentalism could ultimately be a greater threat to Saddam Hussein than George W. Bush. So Hussein is co-opting the power of religion to further his own agenda, building the biggest mosque in the world and commissioning portraits of him praying. He may be hoping to head off any threat of an Islamic uprising, an uprising that even the Bush administration wouldn't want. For Foreign Assignment, I'm Hadani Ditmars in Baghdad.